Amigos, I'm Joshua Orro, the Mustang Prince, and welcome to Mustang Prince Orro Reports. Well, everybody, as you can see by my sombrero here, it's Cinco de Mayo, and what do I have in mind today? Well, let me take you back to the very first movie that I blogged for this event, The Three Caballeros. Now, believe me when I say that it's been a very long time since I blogged this movie. And when I say long, I mean 8 years. And ever since my childhood, I thought this was a very fun movie. But at the same time, it can also be very educational due to it teaching us about South America and Mexico. However, it can also be a pretty weird one due to several things like the Araquan, Donald Duck playing Blind Duck's bluff with live-action Latin American girls, which would make his sweetheart Daisy feel very infuriated. And of course, the movie ends with a 10-minute fever dream finale. However, little did I know until the late 2000s that The Three Caballeros is actually Walt Disney Animation Studios' first sequel. Now, for several years, I never thought that I could pull off an actual blog on its predecessor, but then again, several subscribers, including many of my closest friends, my job coaches, even my family, asked me to give it a shot. And after some heavy thinking and a little bit of hesitation, I think maybe I should. So, let's get started, amigos. Released on February 19th, 1943, the movie is Saludos Amigos. Now, on for the plot of the movie. This film focuses on a group of Disney animators who are on a goodwill tour in South America. And while recording their impressions in sketches, they present 4 animated segments inspired by their trip. These segments include Lake Titicaca, which depicts tourist Donald Duck's troubles with a stubborn llama, Pedro, which tells of a little male plane's adventures flying over the treacherous Andes, El Gaucho Goofy, which transplants an American cowboy into the Argentine Pampas, and Aquarela do Brazil, where Jose Carioca shows Donald Duck the sights and sounds of Rio de Janeiro. Now, what do I personally think of the film? Well, despite the fact that I never actually grew up with this movie during my childhood, and I didn't watch it until sometime in the 2010s, all I can say is that it was both good and interesting. But now, let's head over to Mustang Notes. In early 1941, before U.S. entry into World War II, the United States Department of State commissioned a Disney Goodwill tour of South America intended to lead to a movie to be shown in the United States, Central, and South America as part of the Good Neighbor policy. This was being done because several Latin American governments had close ties with Nazi Germany, and the U.S. government wanted to counteract those ties. Mickey Mouse and other Disney characters were very popular in Latin America, and Walt Disney acted as ambassador. The tour, which was facilitated by Nelson Rockefeller, who had recently been appointed as coordinator of Inter-American Affairs, or CIAA, took Disney and a group of roughly 20 composers, artists, technicians, etc. from his studio to South America, mainly to Brazil and Argentina, but also to Chile and Peru. The film itself was given federal loan guarantees because the Disney studio had overexpanded just before European markets were closed to them by the war. And because Disney was struggling with labor unrest at the time, including a strike that was underway at the time, the goodwill journey began. The film included live-action documentary sequences which featured footage of modern Latin American cities with skyscrapers and fashionably dressed residents. This surprised many contemporary U.S. visitors who associated such images only with the United States and European cities and contributed to changing impressions of Latin America. Also to note, the film also inspired Chilean cartoonist Rene Rios Bodiger, aka Pepo, to create Condorito, one of Latin America's most ubiquitous cartoon characters. Now, in my opinion, the live-action photography and cinematography for the time looks very interesting, and I really love how it gives the animators some really neat inspiration. And I think the hand-drawn animation for each segment is not just classical, but it's also very comical, zany, and interesting. And now, let's talk about each segment and see what I think of each one. First up is Lake Titicaca. In this segment, Donald Duck visits the famous Lake Titicaca, located at the border of Peru and Bolivia. While looking around, he learns of the lake's traditions and he makes a failed attempt at sailing a balsa boat before setting off through the mountains atop a llama. He panics when the llama is busy walking across a wooden suspension bridge, eventually resulting in his fall, where he lands in a pottery shop, shattering some pots and taking others with him. In my opinion, this is a pretty funny segment, and to be honest, I think it's a lot better than Donald Duck's visit to the Grand Canyon. What I like about this segment is that it features local colors which were based on the illustrations of the artists, such as shoppers and merchants. Also, I like the scene where a child plays a homemade flute to control a llama. And I thought the scene at the suspension bridge was not only suspenseful, but it kind of gave me Emperor's New Groove flashbacks. Our second segment is Pedro. This segment tells the story of a small anthropomorphic child airplane named Pedro who lives in Chile with his mother and father, who are large airplanes who deliver the mail. When they both are incapacitated due to technical difficulties, Pedro is forced to embark on his first journey in their place, picking up post from Mendoza. His flight is perilous and dangerous, and he's nearly killed in a storm near Aconcagua on his way back. But thankfully, in the end, he manages to make it back home victoriously. To me, this segment kind of feels like a mix of The Little Engine That Could, Little Toot, JJ the Jet Plane, and Disney Toon Studios' Planes movies. And I think Pedro seems like a very determined and brave character while facing a dangerous storm in order to accomplish his mail delivery mission. And I think the Aconcagua mountain looks very scary. Also to note, while Walt Disney's crew were not allowed to take photos while in Chile, I still find it interesting that they were able to take photos by sketching them as they remember it. Now we come to El Gaucho Goofy. In this, Goofy is reimagined as a Texas cowboy and is put to work as a gaucho in Argentina. He works together with a trickster horse as the narrator explains the life of a gaucho. Life as a gaucho for Goofy is strange, harsh, and tiresome, not because of the living conditions, but mainly due to the antics of his horse. To me, this segment is presented very similarly to most Goofy cartoons, where he demonstrates several subjects while going through some silly antics, like the art of skiing and how to haunt a house. Also, I think the part where Goofy's horse lays on his saddle like a mattress was pretty funny, and I think asado, which is a complex salty sour dish of pork shoulder slowly cooked in tomato sauce and flavored with garlic and soy sauce, which Goofy tries during his Argentinian barbecue, looks very delicious. Also, the most memorable and hilarious part was when Goofy uses bolas to capture a type of ostrich known as a rhea in both fast and slow motion. By the way, I heard that this segment had to go through some editing for several VHS and DVD releases, in order to remove one scene in which Goofy is shown smoking a cigarette. But thankfully, like the Pecos Bill segment in Melody Time, you can watch its uncensored version on Disney+. And finally, we come to our last segment, Aquarela do Brasil. In this, a paintbrush paints a beautifully rendered Brazilian jungle, which Donald Duck emerges from a flower at some point. While standing around, Donald sees the paintbrush create another figure, Jose Carioca. Jose takes Donald out of the jungle and into Rio de Janeiro, where Donald accidentally drinks an incredibly spicy drink before spending the night going out and dancing to the samba in Rio with Jose. In my eyes, this segment kind of made me think of Melody Time due to the paintbrush, and I thought the animation for Rio de Janeiro is truly inspirational, kind of like Blue Sky's Rio years later. Plus, I think the music for this segment is really catchy, and it makes me want to jump up and dance the night away. And now, let's go over the 3 animated characters and their beloved actors who brought them to life. First, we have Goofy, voiced by Pinto Colvig, who also voices as the Araquan, 2 of the 7 dwarfs, and a few of Maleficent's goons. To me, during this movie, I think Goofy is really zany while playing as a Texan cowboy who works as an Argentinian gaucho. And I think his horse is a pretty funny trickster, kind of like Bugs Bunny. Next we have Donald Duck, voiced by Clarence Ducky Nash. Now during this movie, Donald has the most appearances due to him being in 2 animated segments. He plays as a tourist while visiting the famous lake of Lake Titicaca, and he takes a tour through Rio de Janeiro. However, the part where Donald drinks some cachaca was pretty extreme, and like most drinks that are not good for your health, like alcohol, cachaca is one drink that I would definitely want to avoid. Next we come to Jose Carioca, voiced by Brazilian musician and composer Jose Oliveira. Like in the 3 Caballeros and Melody Time, Jose is suave, cool, extremely benevolent, charming, kind-hearted, and debonair, and he tends to make friends fairly easily. Plus, I find it pretty neat that Jose can use his umbrella as a musical instrument, such as a flute, guitar, or a trombone. And I like that he's very passionate about the Brazilian culture. Plus, it's revealed that Jose is a really big fan of Donald Duck and his cartoons, and I think Jose makes a pretty great guide while giving Donald a tour of Brazil and teaching him how to dance the samba. And finally, the film's narrator is voiced by the legendary Fred Shields, who previously voiced as the Great Prince of the Forest in Bambi. And now for my final words. Overall, Saludos Amigos is a pretty decent movie to watch. While the movie is 42 minutes long, and the fact that I didn't grow up with it during my childhood, I think the animation is very inspirational. The animated segments are classical, zany, and hilarious. The live-action cinematography and photography are interesting and educational, and I like how it expresses and defines the Latin American culture. So, I guess, if you folks like the 3 Caballeros or any classic animated film from Walt Disney's time, this is a movie that I recommend you folks to check out, especially during Cinco de Mayo. I give this movie a 91% out of 100. Well, that's all for now. Be sure to join me for my next blog, where we look at Thor's 4th movie in the MCU, Mustang Power. Oh, and to all my Latin American viewers out there, adios!
When a fellow loves a maiden, and that maiden doesn't love him, it's the same as when a bold man finds a comb upon the highway. La cucaracha doesn't want to travel on, because she hasn't because she hasn't slept since yesterday at dawn. La cucaracha doesn't want to travel on because she